Looks like we're live on YouTube. And so I will make sure that we're recording on my end. This is Male Entrepreneur Podcast, episode number 162. And we are live in 3, 2. All right. Welcome to... Let me start that over.
we gotta have a blooper series here, man.
I know. All right. Welcome back to the Male Entrepreneur Podcast, the podcast for men who win, with your host, Purdeep Sangha. Purdeep, how you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm watching some of the technology in my office kind of start to flash. I don't know what's going on. You might start to hear a printer going off in the back. Yep, it's starting to print. That's my kid on the network printing out his stuff, it sounds like.
What a great way to start the show.
We're working from home, right?
Yeah, there you go. And we also have a very special guest lined up for today.
Yeah, we actually have someone I'm super excited to have on the show today. Consider him a good friend, a fellow Canadian, lives not too far from me, actually, about half an hour away. We have Shailesh Godse with us today. He's a consultant in the investment space, and I wanted to have him on today mainly because there's a lot of, you can say, information out there when it comes to investments, what to invest in, what not to invest in. And I think there's just a lot of shady characters and just shadiness in general. And I wanted someone that I could trust to come on the show and just share his knowledge and his wealth with the audience here. So Shailesh, welcome to the show today.
Great. Thank you for having me.
So how's your day so far, man?
So far, so good. It's nice and sunny out there. It's enjoyable. So I'm enjoying it so far.
So you and I met, I can't even remember how many years ago, but it was obviously in the investment space. I was working at the credit union at that time, right. And we connected and we stayed connected, which is kind of nice. And I'm glad we did because you're doing some interesting ventures as well now. We talked about that offline. You're doing real estate, which is cool. But I think we really wanted to have you on the show here to just share your knowledge because you're obviously an investment guy. You're maybe you can tell the audience, Sure. You're a consultant. What do you help organizations do, or what do you do in that space?
Yeah, so thank you, Pardeep. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We go way back in the credit union space when I was the regional vice president of Eastern Canada. And I know I served at first Ontario where you were, but I learned so much from you in terms of looking at mind, body, and soul, in terms of, having that trifactor in terms of relationships and self-healing and things of that nature. So I appreciate your friendship over the years as well. So in terms of myself, I've been in the investment industry, wealth management industry for the last 28 years. And it goes back even to my childhood when I first started reading books about investments at the age of 14 with Warren Buffett, Benjamin Franklin, and other experts in the wealth management arena. I knew this was my calling. And that's where I started to develop my need for reading more about that industry. And then even going through university, took finance at the University of Manitoba, Winnipeg, born and raised. So good, nice Midwest boy. And from there, I started out with a company which just had its head office in Winnipeg, which was Investors Group, and started in the portfolio manager area as an analyst. And it was terrific. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. But back then, the internet was just in its infancy and you didn't have a lot of information. So a lot of my information was reading annual reports, like paper-based annual reports, and going through financial statements and some things of that nature, which was interesting, but I couldn't see myself doing that, on a long-term basis. And so the good thing about working in a head office environment is that you get to see other aspects of an organization. And one aspect that I was really fancied with was the marketing side of a financial service organization. And so I started out in market research, did some competitive intelligence with the organization. And when I first started, we had a new CEO coming in, a chief executive officer coming in, and we were embarking on a 5-year strategic plan. And so that helped me really diversify myself into different areas of the industry. And I always knew that, we have to do education and really help individuals become more financially independent and really educate them on the need for financial literacy, which at the time was really dependent upon financial advisors. And so, that really led me to move into different areas of the organization and try and streamline that. And it was interesting. When I first joined the industry, I'm going to date myself now. It's 1993. Back then, the internet was in its infancy, and so Investors Group didn't really have a website. And I remember Jeff Bezos talks about it back then, saying, he could see the trajectory of using the internet for growth. And I saw that opportunity with Investors Group as well, in disseminating information so that clients and or prospects really wouldn't have to rely upon an advisor, or the advisory services would complement some of the information that should be disseminated to individuals, so that at least they can achieve their financial goals going long term. So I had the opportunity to work on that the website as a team, and we actually launched it after a year, because it took a long time, because at the time not a lot of people knew what the internet was and how you can use it. So it took a little salesmanship in terms of trying to get our executives to agree upon getting an internet site up and running. And so that led to my area into financial services. And then from there, did my certified financial planning designation, was training advisors. And so it led into huge opportunities within the industry. So really
what are you focused on now? Because you're consulting other organizations. What are you consulting mainly on?
Yeah, so a lot of the consultation has been primarily on strategy. More recently, I was working with a financial service organization last year, and it was, how do you adopt your whole strategy in a COVID environment?
Mm-hmm.
So in utilizing, Zoom and technology today, and how to have a relationship via Zoom. I go back to the days of Star Trek, where you see the Klingons and Star Trek using those services just to connect up with individuals. So it's interesting how the relationship and the dynamics of that relationship between advisor and our client and our prospects are evolving. And I'll give you an example where I helped an advisor with a large case, and it was more of an estate. The client had passed away, but we had to deal with the next generation. And unfortunately, the next generation, one of the siblings was in Malaysia, one was in Vancouver, and the other one was in Toronto. But to coordinate amongst all of them, we just used the technology of Zoom to ensure that we were connecting with them and ensuring that family members were also connected who would have been affected by this large estate. And so it became a lot easier and simpler to use just from technology. And so that's really where I'm helping some of the advisors and some of the organizations in terms of utilizing technology to its full potential in connecting or developing relationships with clients and or prospects.
So what are you seeing in the industry right now when it comes to investment space, whether someone is on the investor side or on the organizational side? What are you seeing right now happen in this COVID environment?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think with COVID, it allowed people to have more time as well and access to information. And that could be a good thing or it could be a bad thing. And when I look at a bad thing, we looked at some of the notions where more and more people are doing online trading. So a recent stat from 2020 was that there were over 1 million online, this is in Canada, only 1 million online accounts that were opened. Whereas on the flip side, with a financial advisory or where you need that advice, only 20,000 accounts were open. So we're starting to see more and more people take on the online trading, and they have more time, right? So they can do their own research and things of that nature. And with the internet, there's a lot more access to information. And we saw that with more recently with AMC and even GameStop, right? Where you got a lot more traders that were coming in, but it could be the equivalent of gambling as well, where you're just trying to catch the wave and ride that wave without understanding some of the fundamentals of the company itself. So that's in effect a good thing, but it's also a challenge in itself with many people going online and trading.
I know Nathan has a question there, so I'm going to hold off on my next one.
Yeah, it's
Sure.
actually a follow-up to what you were just talking about. As far as technology goes, I was one of the early adopters of Bitcoin. I started taking Bitcoin for payments back when it was still $12 a coin,
Nice.
which was pretty awesome for me. But technology in that aspect of investing kind of was a unknown frontier. And then we just saw the whole GameStop, AMC, people, I don't know if I want to say manipulating the market, but as far as it goes, I mean, there's a lot of market manipulation, and it seemed like the average everyday person was like, hey, if these people can manipulate the market, maybe we can manipulate the market as well. And technology, through the accessibility of investing, made it possible. So I guess my question for you is, as these different technologies, the blockchain and investing opens up to more and more people through these different technologies, what do you see kind of going forward as more and more people see investing as something that's accessible to them? Are we going to see more of these crazy roller coasters? Is there going to be some sort of leveling out? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, great question, Nathan. And I think you're right with something like Bitcoin, which is, at $58,000 now today. We're starting to see more and more people get into that space as well, and it's great because it really projects an evolution in some of those products and services, which primarily institutional type of investors would have had access to, and now it's becoming a lot more mainstream. And we're starting to see an evolution where even some of the large fund companies, I know CI launched Bitcoin, Purpose Investments launched their Bitcoin, just for those who need some advice. But for others who don't necessarily need that advice, they can purchase that on their online trading as well. And also, we're starting to see, individuals like Elon Musk invest in Bitcoin, and you can now buy a Tesla just by trading Bitcoin as well. And we're starting to see credit cards even offering you can make payments by Bitcoin. So I think you're starting to see that evolution of some of the growth of those services come into fruition, where it's now becoming more mainstream, and more people are going to look at it as well as an investment. And it's interesting because I know I'm on some variety of different WhatsApp chat groups where Bitcoin is one of them, and other cryptocurrencies. I'm on other WhatsApp groups where people are doing their own online trading. I'm part of other groups. And so what we're starting to see is that, more and more people start to take on ownership of their finances, they're starting to, be part of these groups as well. But therein lies a challenge, because sometimes you get, like, when I look at the stream of some of these WhatsApp groups, I don't have the time to look at it. Like, after maybe an hour, I'll see like 130 messages. I'll just scroll to the bottom just to see the latest one, because I don't have time to go on to the whole thread, the email thread. But that's when it lies the opportunity for either having the advice component or the non-advice. But I'm starting to see more and more people take on the ownership of their cryptocurrencies, so whether they want to invest in that or whether they want to invest in the online trading platforms. But it comes back to the fundamentals: is that invest in steady companies that you feel comfortable with and that you're using today. And those would be good fundamentals to follow when you're looking at various companies or even Bitcoins or cryptocurrencies as well.
You talk about, I'm going to say, just bad forecasting on my part. For example, I remember I was in the credit union system at that time, and I was put on a project for cryptocurrency. And this is when Bitcoin was at 2 to 10 cents. And when I did my research at that time, I just couldn't justify it because we were taking a look to say, do we create some kind of cryptocurrency? And it just didn't make sense to me. Coming from a financial background, I was like, okay, blockchain technology makes sense, but everything else is just, there's no backing to it.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
and even today, it doesn't make any sense to me outside of the technology that it's literally like thin air, right? There's no backing, there's no government regulation, really, from my understanding. So I totally just, you can say, missed missed the boat on that one, because if I look back, I'm like, even if I invested $100 at that time, it would have been a significant investment. But it's one of those things where you just don't have that crystal ball, right? But Shailesh, I want to get your take on this because we're coming up close here. We got a few minutes.
Sure.
My brother and I were having a conversation around this, and he's in the investment space as well. We were talking about cryptocurrency. And some people consider it a safe investment, and he's just like, you know what? It shouldn't be considered a safe investment. I want to get your take on this. This whole thing about cryptocurrency. Where do you think it's going?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and you're absolutely right. It's one of those things where it's not regulated as the other industry, investment industry. So that's one component of it. Second component is when you look at fundamentals of a cryptocurrency, there are no fundamentals, right? You can't anticipate what the profits or loss is based on supply and demand. And we've seen that with a lot of bubbles that popped as well with those types of investments based on supply and demand. And it goes back to where Elon Musk can tweet something and all of a sudden Bitcoin will rise, or someone can say something negative and it will fall as well, right? So there's a huge component of that. And also there's the black market where many individuals who invested in cryptocurrencies may have had their, unless you secure it offline, you'd get your cryptocurrency stolen, right? That's another component to it. And so there's a lot of, I guess, angst or even negativity that comes with that, unless you really understand the fundamentals of cryptocurrency. Having said that, I know there's a lot of government services that are now looking at cryptocurrencies and that huge blockchain as an alternative to their own currencies, right? And so we've seen many countries like China and other countries tend to look at that as a peg so that they're not hugely reliant upon the US dollar, which is, the kind of the world standard. And so we're starting to see a lot of countries kind of take a look at that and maybe potentially create their own cryptocurrency. We've got also even private companies like Facebook, PayPal, that are looking at their own currency systems as well. So, Facebook has Libra and, other providers that are looking to get into that. So it's fundamentally becoming a little more mainstream from that perspective, but there's still a lot more that has to be uncovered. And I even know regulators are looking into that space as well.
That's awesome. And not to say that people aren't making money, because there's a lot of people making money hand over fist on this. So I'm not going to say it's not a moneymaker if you know what you're doing. I'm just saying from a financial background and understanding this, I just don't see who it's like thin air to me. And the one thing I do know is that there's enough fraud in the regular banking system. Like, we're talking about like tens of billions of dollars, if not hundreds of billions in North America alone.
Right.
There's a lot of fraud that happens in the regulations. I know we beat up on the government for regulations, but there's a lot of good regulations as well. We saw that in Canada in the 2008 bubble, when we weren't hit nearly as hard as the US because our banks were just a lot more stringent in terms of the regulations from the capital requirements. So regulations do have a part to play. I think for the people out there, you got to weigh out both sides, because you can make money in the short term, but I'm just hoping, because I know you mentioned something at the very beginning, gambling. And when people do have too much time, investing does become gambling for them. And I think that's why it's important to take information from a professional like yourself, or an organization that has some, you can say, ethical guidelines as well. And there's a big reason for having the ethics and having to be certified for, like you said, the CFP. There's a whole you have to go through the whole ethics part of that as well. So thanks for sharing that knowledge. We're coming up close here. What would be your last message for the audience out there when it comes to investing in this current market right now?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great opportunity. I think one of the things that I always tell people is that look at the fundamentals, and you have to ask your question: Are you comfortable in owning that stock or investment? Right. That's most important. Are you comfortable if you're looking to purchase a Disney or a Tesla, or how comfortable are you? And if you are, and you've got that sleep at night factor, great. And if not, then, like as you mentioned, is it gambling, and are you at risk in losing money? So you want that sleep at night factor. And like you said, rely upon some experts as well. If you feel that you're not comfortable in doing it on your own, look to the advisory component to help you, guide you along that path.
And Shailesh, where can people reach out to you in terms of contact information, email that you might have, just in case someone has any questions?
Sure. Yeah. So my email address is Shailesh Godse. So that's SHAILESH. Last name Godse, GODSE, number 1 @gmail.com. Or alternatively, 905-516-4012 is my telephone number.
You may get a lot of crypto guys calling. Yeah,
no worries. I'm all for it. I've got a WhatsApp group on crypto, so I'd be happy to include them on part of that WhatsApp group.
Oh, that's awesome.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your knowledge with our listeners. I enjoyed the conversation. Pardeep, thanks for lining this conversation up. And if people want to check out more episodes of the podcast, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, check us out at youtubeformen.com or mailpodcast.com.
All right. And until next time, gentlemen, we will catch you.